Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to this learning experience brought to you by Cortex. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning, where we do have an exciting presentation ahead. Before we get that started, we do have just a couple of housekeeping notes to review. First off, we are recording today's session, so if you happen to miss any of our conversation, if you have to leave early, if you join us late, rest assured we will be sending you the recording via email shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is the chat tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. So I'm seeing people from Nigeria, Pakistan, Australia, New Mexico, El Salvador, global audience. So if you see that chat tab, let us know from where in the world you are joining us. If you have any specific questions, and we do have time set aside at the end of our program to address questions, please submit those to the Q&A. Submitting your questions to the Q&A helps us keep track, and we want to be sure to answer as many of your questions as we can. Additionally, if you jump over to that handouts tab, you'll see a couple of resources there for you, so feel free to grab those. And before we close things out, I am giving away 2 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around to see if you are one of our lucky winners. So into our topic today, the top 5 use cases for internal developer portals, or IDPs. And I'm joined today by Lauren Craigie, Head of Product Marketing at Cortex. So Lauren, welcome back to Techstrong Learning. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. I'm going to pass you the mic and let you run away with it.
Great, thank you so much, Cody. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. I figured since y'all will be spending about 45 minutes with me, maybe longer, that I should introduce myself. As Cody said, I look after product marketing at a company called Cortex, which is an internal developer portal. If you'll notice that Cody kind of slipped a bit and said platform instead of portal, that's very common, and I'm going to talk a bit about the differences later on, so stay tuned for that. What I do right now in product marketing is mostly market customer research, which means I get access to a lot of different types of use cases. And then I feed those insights into our product roadmap or create content like this webinar. Personally speaking, I've been 15 years in software security and data. I recently moved to Reno from Bozeman, Montana, so pretty mountainous areas all around. One is significantly hotter, but starting to cool down here. I also have a very talkative Oski who is doing a great job of being in the other room for a while until right when this webinar started. And so he's now sitting on the guest bed over here, and hopefully he doesn't interrupt us, but he is quite talkative sometimes. So I wanted to take a moment to talk a bit about Cortex here. This is not a sales pitch for Cortex in this presentation, but it's kind of unavoidable to talk about internal developer portals while we're talking about the use cases for them, and that's what Cortex is. We've designed Cortex to help developers take ownership over the state and quality of their software in the most efficient way possible. Our mantra is really unblocking engineers from a lot of the rote work that they would be doing, or unblocking them from not having access and visibility into the entire stack so that we can unlock productivity. We are backed by Sequoia and IDP. We just closed a $35 million Series B in May, so pretty excited about that. And we have customers of all different sizes from every different vertical. We've worked with engineering teams that are as small as an engineering team of maybe 50, upwards to engineering teams that have 10,000, 15,000 different engineers. So a pretty broad range there, but just giving you a little bit of an understanding of who we work with today. So in thinking through the agenda today, it was really tough to talk about use cases for internal developer portals without first taking a bit of time to explain how we got here, where they even came from, and that will help us understand some of the initial use cases, the initial problems that they're solving. And so I'll spend a bit of time in how did the landscape shift? What sort of problems has that presented? What tooling do we have today to solve some of these problems? Where do IDPs come into the picture? And then I'll go right into what are the top use cases that I've seen from market research that we've done, from non-customers, from existing customers, how they're using it today. I also know that we have some customers on this call today. I know that folks are always interested in learning more about what else they can do with the platform once they've got those initial use cases locked in. They want to get creative with some additional things. So I think that we have information for everybody that could be in the audience today. But I also don't want to overwhelm folks. We get this question a lot. Internal developer portals are still relatively new. If you follow Gartner, they've just written a market guide that Cortex is featured in. But a market guide means that there's no magic quadrant yet. The category isn't fully finalized yet. Things are still fairly new. So if you have questions about IDPs or portals, platforms, you want to know who's out there, definitely open to all the questions that you have. You wouldn't be alone in this. But I also, again, don't want to overwhelm folks with too many possibilities. So we do have a suggested order of operations, whether you choose Cortex, whether you choose a different IDP, whether you build something yourself, of how you might want to tackle these use cases in thinking through marrying features that maybe you'd be building or using in a platform to what you can actually achieve with those things. So let's get started here. Some of the changes in the tech landscape. So it's pretty indisputable that the last 5 years of tech modernization made us more efficient. Microservices, K8s, containerization have enabled us to do a lot of parallel development work, which does enable teams to move faster and create things faster. Cloud hosting, albeit not having occurred in the last 5 years, more like the last 12, 13 years, has made storage and compute significantly cheaper. And then, of course, developers are kind of inundated with lots of different tools to help them be more productive, ship faster. But the problem now is that as that tooling has increased, our efficiency as teams is starting to dip a little bit. We're seeing some of the knock-on effects of these very good things because they're starting to spiral a little bit. So if you are looking at IDPs, this is probably happening to you, or you're trying to prevent a situation where this might happen to you, where maybe service volume, software in general volume that you've created internally makes it really hard to track ownership. Who owns this thing? Where did it come from? What is it connected to? Where's the documentation? What does it do? Why is it named after a Star Wars character? We've seen a lot of those problems at the start of the company. We still continue to see that as being, a number one use case for IDPs, is just being able to understand where everything is and what it does. We are saving a lot of money in moving to kind of cloud hosting and storage, but we're now kind of paying for poorly configured software, or sometimes things that we kind of forgot exist. I've heard this come up a lot in the developer community of folks saying, hey, I've just joined a new team, but I can't tell what I have access to, what services I'm responsible for, what even exists, but I have a job to do. So I might end up going away and creating something very similar to something that's already been created. And then you're paying for that as well. So those costs start to inch up incrementally. The cost structure for the cloud providers right now is a completely different situation, which can also feel like it's running away from us, but there's things that we can do to kind of incrementally bring those things down and start to get them into control. We also have lots of different tools for developers, which is great, but now they're kind of bottlenecked by process, or they have noise from a ton of different tools. This is the number one thing that came up in a developer research survey I ran in the last month. What's the number one pain point generally, even outside the context of an IDP? And it was just noise from too many tools. Tools are great, but just not really being sure of where to focus was a big pain point. So I want to double click on that last point there. I'm not here to tell you in this presentation that the problem is tooling, that you should get rid of tooling. The problem is really the gaps that have started to form between tooling that you're using across your stack, that there really is no system of record across the entire engineering organization. And when you don't have that, it makes it really hard to enforce quality without sacrificing some speed. And we have some tools for this today. So hopefully your mind is running right now and thinking through what your stack looks like today. We've got APM tools that are fantastic for monitoring performance of solutions, reliability, but they're not actually carrying context about how these things were created, where they're created, who created them, what language was used, what the dependencies were, and the quality of it. So there's some gaps there. Next, we have a new category, engineering intelligence or Eng-metric solutions, which are gaining a lot of popularity around the conversation in developer productivity. And those are great solutions too, but they're not actually doing much to drive forward progress of these initiatives once you've identified a gap in how your team might be performing. What are you doing to actually improve the quality of the work that they have or their efficiency? And then we have solutions like CI/CD solutions, Git, Jira, dev platforms, sometimes even spreadsheets, which can help speed software development, but again, are not doing a lot to ensure standards are being met. So there's this kind of gap in the top right corner here where we have the right intersection of quality and velocity. But moreover, we're missing a solution that actually connects to all those things, not replacing them, not just sitting alongside them, but actually enabling you to take data from all of those solutions that you already have and make better decisions. Which brings us to IDPs. So IDPs, internal developer portals, ensure standards are met across mostly service-oriented architectures today. That seems to be where the biggest pain point is versus companies who are wholly focused on monoliths. But we're starting to see a bit of that shift as well. There's 3 core components to IDPs. This is not just specific to Cortex. This is any IDP on the market today. It needs to be a system of record. So pulling in data from across your stack and giving you that visibility into all of your services, infrastructure, APIs, anything created internally. The next layer is the assessment layer, which is a little bit newer for IDPs. When IDPs were first created, they kind of formed out of software catalogs and then kind of expanded some feature sets from there. And the assessment layer is a really important milestone in that process because it enabled IDPs to start creating scorecards using all of that data. If you're going to be a system of record and you have access to all of this data, using that to drive consistency in existing software that was built and new software. And then the third layer is self-service. So this is being able to deploy services, resources in line with standards that you've created and do that quickly and efficiently without making your devs kind of rewrite a lot of rote code or potentially stray from that process that you've set out for them. It's this piece right here that tends to get confused a little bit with internal developer platforms. And I'm not going to go a ton into this, but there is a blog in the handout section. There's also lots of blogs on the internet right now about differences between portals and platforms. So I definitely recommend you do some reading there if you're kind of confused still. But one summary point here is that platforms are more focused on orchestration of processes outside the portal, whereas portals are going to be a little bit more focused on getting the catalog straight, making sure that your processes are in order, making sure that you're following the right steps necessary to ship this stuff before any of that orchestration layer. So just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit of the difference there. Cortex in particular, and this is the last slide I have just on kind of explaining IDPs and Cortex, takes those same foundations and has up-leveled them a little bit. So from a system of record perspective, we've got 50 plus integrations across the stack already ready to go. But we also allow you to bring in custom data. There's internal systems that you have. There's other tools we're probably not connected to that you can also bring into the platform and adjust them as needed. And you can also add plugins too to make sure that you're creating new experiences for your developers inside the platform. The assessment phase, we have scorecards that are completely customizable. Any use case that you might have, any rubric that you want to create, any way that you want to pull in your data to set those rules, you can do in our scorecards. But we also have initiatives, which are a little unique because we enable you to actually set deadlines, assign specific parts of a scorecard, really important tasks you need to get done this week, next month, and then push out alerts and reminders and make sure that you're kind of handling that process automatically. And then from a self-service perspective, we enable you to template and bootstrap services and resources, but you can also have a more personalized developer homepage experience so that when devs log in, they can actually see not just what they own and have access to, but what they need to do. Here's the priority task that you have that is due in 2 days. Here's something that's due in 3 hours. You've got to get MTTR down on this particular service to down to under an hour. You need to do that by next week. So very user-friendly as well. Okay, use cases. I'm excited. Let's move into what we've seen so far. So top initiatives driving IDP adoption today. This is what we tend to hear the most from customers that come to us in their first conversations. This is what I found in some of the market research as well. The number one thing that comes up is service ownership, which sounds very basic, but it's incredibly important and seems to be a gap for a lot of organizations right now. Just understanding who owns what does this thing do, where does it live, who built it, is a huge problem. The next that comes up the most related to IDPs is production readiness. And I'm going to spend more time going through each one of these, but I kind of wanted to give you a preview first. Production readiness is essentially setting up a checklist of things that every developer needs to do to get their software production ready. Next, that's becoming increasingly popular is migration and EOL initiatives. I was just talking to our marketing ops person the other day, and she noted that traffic to this particular solution page on our website is up something like 50% just in the last month compared to the rest of the year prior. So something's happening, I think, in this space where folks are either needing to onboard or offboard new technologies, change frameworks, maybe get everybody to move to Kubernetes, maybe dealing with an AWS EOL initiative, which I know is pretty common right now, especially in this month. So I'm excited to talk about that one as well. The next thing that comes up the most is probably security and compliance use cases. Sometimes these roll into production readiness checklists. Make sure that you're connected to a vulnerability management solution that we already have. Make sure vulns are under this amount. But more often than not, I see security scorecards broken out separately in the platform. And it's not just owned by the security team. It's kind of a joint effort between security and engineering, or maybe a DevSecOps person to make sure that you're following best practices. Next is cost optimization, which is one that I'm really excited about because it's kind of relatively new for me. I'm sure every B2B vendor right now is talking about reducing costs of their solution, which is, that part's not new, but I think there's actually things you can be doing that are a little bit more quantifiable. You can do with an IDP to make sure that you're monitoring what's happening and how software is being built and kind of nipping things in the bud quickly to kind of keep those costs down. And then, of course, dev productivity. I would say top left, bottom right are the things that actually do come up the most when talking about IDPs. I want to improve access to all the information from across my stack because I want my developers to be more productive. And there's lots of steps along the way that contribute to that, but we'll also talk about that as well. Technically, this is 6, and the title of this webinar is only 5 use cases, but I'll explain that a bit later. One more thing to note on this slide is that I tried to group this in terms of like shorter and longer term initiatives. There's some initiatives that you can undertake with an IDP that are ongoing and continuous. And I think when people first thought about internal developer portals, they were thinking about long-term increasing quality and reliability of all their services and resources. And it felt like a very large project to undertake. But there are a lot of like shorter term tasks or projects you can undertake with an IDP as well. Just getting your catalog set up could be relatively quick if you're already sure of your information architecture. Just getting a couple scorecards going, saying, hey, make sure that you have a reviewer in Git for this service. And that could be it. It could be as simple as that. Migration EOL as well could be a good use case. If you've got to deal with an AWS EOL migration, you need to get it done quickly. That's kind of an open and shut project. Once we finish that, we move off of that and we kind of retire that scorecard. So there's a mix of projects you can undertake with an IDP. I just don't want folks thinking it's all like very long-term initiatives. So let's talk about software ownership first. So what is it first? Every internally developed software entity. If anybody has a better word for this, by the way, I would really appreciate it coming from product marketing. We've talked about software entity, software component, but what we mean when we say that is not just services, but infrastructure and APIs, kind of anything that's created internally and the way that you want to group that and refer to it. But making sure that all those components that you've created or entities you've created have an owner, have people on call to support it, maybe have documentation, and not just owner like a name is assigned, but owner as in has accountability for it, understands their role in making it better, understands that reliability is important for this. So that as a generalized use case is probably the thing that comes up the most. Why it's hard today, service-oriented architectures in particular have created this sort of explosion of entities that today you might have 2 ways of dealing with this. Either you're trying to track it in a spreadsheet, and I'm going to be honest, if you've got less than 5 to 10 services, you might be able to do that in a spreadsheet. You might be able to continue to track owners. People aren't coming and going from your teams too quickly if your company is relatively small. But we are seeing more people come to us right before they start their journey to microservices because they want to make sure they're setting up those standards appropriately. And they know that eventually that spreadsheet is going to be really tough to maintain. It's also difficult because we have toolings that we think should be able to do this. You spend a lot of money on ITSMs, monitoring tools, and rightfully so. They do a lot of really fantastic things, but they don't, enforce ownership, dependencies, documentation, some of the things that we would expect, but are kind of missing today. So what failure feels like if you maybe haven't been able to put words to the problem. You don't know that the issue is service ownership. Here's some of the things that you might be experiencing. MTTR will go up, whether you want to define that as mean time to review, resolve, remediate, kind of all of them are affected. In that, a very simple use case, your support team doesn't know who owns the thing and who to go to when something goes wrong. And sometimes that feels like a problem that's just how it goes. It's just going to take a bit of time to find these things. Or if you have a spreadsheet, maybe they can reference that. But those, again, they go out of date really quickly. You've got people moving teams who are no longer responsible for something, people leaving the company who didn't leave documentation about a thing. So it actually takes significantly longer than you would think it should sometimes. The next is productivity going down. If devs are spending too much time piecing together causes, looking for dependencies, trying to understand who made the last change to the thing, what that change was, what the impact was, that's just going to slow them down. A little bit of Cortex context from, that's a tongue twister, Cortex context from seeing our customers create service ownership scorecards and be able to enact this use case. Again, this is the primary use case for 40% of our customer base. And what I mean by this is we have a lot of customers that come to us with multiple different use cases, and we kind of try to pin them down on what's the most important thing for you to solve right now. And 40% of our customers, this is the number one thing. The way that they feel it once they've started to solve it is usually through incident management workflows. That is a sort of aha moment where you're like, oh, this actually didn't need to be this hard. This didn't need to take this long. At the crux of an incident management problem is sometimes who owns the thing and what should they do next? Like, where's the run book to figure out how to resolve this? Who changed what? Who's on call for it? And we have, again, software that's tracking different pieces of the equation, but we have to go to those different solutions to actually find the answer. So an IDP is going to bring these things together. I wanted to take you through an example of what that actually looked like at an organization. A customer of ours, Let's Get Checked. I believe we have a case study for this over in the handouts panel as well. The trigger for Let's Get Checked in wanting to make a change was that their support team, technical support team, would ping a channel of 100+ engineers whenever a service was down. And maybe this sounds familiar to you. I'm sure it sounds like there could have been a better way. There's obviously like sub-channels in engineering that you could have gone to. But the issue is that the support team didn't know which of those sub-teams they should go to for a given service. So they would kind of ping that channel hoping somebody will be available to help with this. And then I'll tell you what you think is going to happen when you do that in a Slack channel and what actually happens. Maybe some of you have experienced this. If there's loads of people in it, everybody sees it, nobody responds because they think somebody else will get this or somebody else knows more than I do. And so it would take them hours to actually get this sorted. So the way to resolve this, and this is not super Cortex specific, you can abstract this out to other IDPs. There's pieces of it that we kind of think we do uniquely better, but the very first step is just syncing all of service details, including owners. So syncing with your identity provider as well to understand who owns this thing and getting that into Cortex. And then immediately seeing who's on call for that given service, what the documentation was, who made the last change. So some of this is for the support engineer, just to see who to contact. And then the rest of this is for the developer to say, all right, I know that I'm on task for this right now. Let me check the documentation. I don't even really remember the service, so let me just see what the status is right now, who made the last change, and what the dependencies were. Then if needed, they can generate an incident from Cortex. From the spot where they're making that decision with all that additional context, they can kind of push out an incident right from within the platform to their externally connected incident management tools. The outcome is pretty surprising, at least to me, when I was doing this case study, which was a near immediate improvement of MTTR by 67%. And sure, this sounds like a very simple fix, and it is. And I think that's the beauty of it, that service ownership is a very simple problem that has not had sufficient response as of late. And so having IDPs kind of enables you to have dramatic outcomes like this pretty quickly once you kind of connect all of that different tooling and get that data into one place. Production readiness. So production readiness, we also hear, maybe use this term as well, software standardization, service onboarding, software onboarding, all phrases that kind of mean something similar, but it's essentially a checklist of things needed to productionize new software. So connection to CI/CD tools, a sufficient amount of testing, code coverage, presence of documentation, The beauty of using a scorecard to enact your production readiness checklist is that you can pull data from across the stack. So I can quickly see, is my CI/CD tool connected? Do I have adequate code coverage in SonarQube, which is the tool that we might use for that? And you can see that all in one place. But why it's hard without an IDP, different software entities just have these different checklists. There's variations in frameworks, infrastructure, teams. What you'll probably see is teams not wanting to get slowed down. So you'll have pods within engineering operating a little bit differently in how they create things. Maybe they kind of know what the baseline standards are. Maybe there's a wiki somewhere that tells them what the baseline standards are. But sometimes we forget and we ship these things out. We just want to get moving quickly. Or maybe it's going through ops review and it takes a long time. And that's another problem too. Maybe you've got somebody who's responsible for checking the quality of this, but maybe there's a backlog, you get bottlenecked. So now again, we're slowing down developers and we don't want to do that. So if you're not doing this, I don't like FUD marketing. I've marketed to security professionals in the past. I know that they hate this too, but this is just a reality. Incidents sometimes go up and they have a higher chance of going up if you're not adequately or consistently developing your software in the same way. If you haven't connected your vuln scanning tools, which you've already spent money on, but maybe you've forgotten to build the connection to what you have now. If you're not enforcing ceilings for unresolved issues or the time it takes to resolve them, that could be a problem as well. And you could face churn. So I know that there's a difference between services, resources that are supporting external facing products and those supporting internal facing products. If it's external and reliability is down, or you've got issues with your code that could have been avoided, could potentially result in customer churn. But you should also think of this from, if you're working with your internal audience, it's actually like developers. If you are a platform engineer or architect and you're building systems for your team to operate, maybe you're not looking at churn, but you're looking at attrition. Because if they're frustrated with the tools that they have and the tools that they use, they will go elsewhere, especially in this market. A little bit of Cortex context here. The primary use case for 25% of our customers with a mix of SRE platform and infra drivers. We get lots of different titles in to talk about this particular use case. I've also seen CISOs in to talk about this, head of security to talk about production readiness. But I'm going to talk more about that title in a second. But this is just to say that this is not just one person's problem. It's coming from like across the entire engineering team. So let's look at SolarWinds use case here. I think this is also in a case study that's linked in the handouts, preparing to launch a new product. So I know it's not news to anybody here that SolarWinds had a pretty significant breach in 2020. And so they've done everything they can think of to kind of revolutionize the way that they are building software and shipping out new products. And part of that did include Cortex. So in 2021, post-breach, when they're kind of rebuilding this program, they came to Cortex because they wanted to make sure that as they were shipping their new observability tool, that every service that was supporting that product was dialed in, had 100% compliance with all of their security and operational best practices, and that they weren't wasting any time in doing it. And so the way that they did that in Cortex was creating security and maturity scorecards. They also created initiatives, which are a way of kind of adding deadlines to these tasks and actually making sure they get into the hands of the individual developer. They can drive action per developer. So as the developer's either logging into Cortex and sees that they have action items due, or maybe gets a notification in Slack to let them know you've got to do this task before Wednesday. And it's the number one thing you should be focused on. And then they were able to track improvement and progress over time. The two biggest champions for this were the CISO of SolarWinds and the VP of engineering. And while developers are also very expensive to waste their time, those two titles in particular are extremely expensive to waste time, right? So this helped them out a lot because these two individuals are not having to have meetings and one-to-one check-ins. What's the status of the thing? Why isn't it getting done? They can do all of that just in a bird's eye view in Cortex and see, where are we falling behind? Why are we falling behind? Does this team need more resources? Do they have a lot of folks that are out on like pat leave or something? What are the reasons why we're not getting this done in time? And not have to do that in a meeting with folks. So the outcome here was that all 96 services that were supporting the observability product hit 100% alignment in 6 weeks, which is something I think would have been really tough for them to do manually, following up with folks and kind of tracking what the status was, So I'm pretty excited about this outcome. Migration and EOL initiatives. What is it? It's lots of things. But when onboarding or offboarding new software frameworks, it's not typically easy to see what's out of date. It's hard because spreadsheets that typically track these things, connection to old tools, package versions, are going to go stale really quickly, especially in cases where you need to update something quickly, like in Log4j, which I'm actually going to talk about a bit later. It takes a while to know like what's still running an outdated package. And in a different use case, EOL deadlines can sometimes feel like a surprise. I know these companies give loads of advance notice for these things, but it never feels like a good time to have your engineering team or your TPMs trying to project manage this and focus on this instead of shipping new value. And then, of course, targeting is a problem. So sometimes this looks like sending out a mass blast to the entire engineering team. And in best case scenario, maybe subgroups in an engineering team saying, hey, if this affects you, you've got to go and update your things. We can get more granular if we had somebody kind of manually reviewing what the status of each thing is. But when folks get too many messages, I'm sure this happens to you too, folks just kind of start to tune out. And the people that you really need to get that message are just not going to see it or listen to it anymore. So what failure feels like: excessive meetings. I've heard of group leads spending 3 to 5 hours a week following up on status of these things. Security risks. We know that old versions don't get patches anymore from vendors. They don't get support from vendors anymore, and that can be problematic for you. And then the dreaded forced upgrades. This doesn't happen all the time, but if you're in a situation with a vendor that is saying, hey, we're end-of-lifing this software, we're going to force you to upgrade if you don't in time, that can be a nightmare. And then the exemption request process is also usually very awful. So if you have to do so many of those at once, that's not an ideal scenario. Cortex context, I would say that AWS EOL initiatives right now are probably the #1 migration use case that we have, but we also have like Kubernetes migration use cases, or like I've got a new CI/CD tool and I want to make sure that everybody's connected to that instead. So let's talk about outreach, a customer of ours. The issue here was that outreach needed to ensure upgrades for any and only those resources using Elasticache or Postgres, because AWS was doing an EOL on those things. So pretty simple 3-step process again: created a scorecard and initiative, create a scorecard and initiative in preparation for the upcoming EOL. Also, if you just saw my dog's face, he's starting to cry, but hopefully you can't hear that. The next thing they did was track progress, and you can track progress at the team level, at a group level, at the individual level, product line level. And so that was an easy way for the TPM to just quickly see, okay, who's falling out of compliance here? Who do I need to focus on? Then the third step was making sure that anybody who was kind of out of compliance or had software that was out of compliance, the connection to Jira made sure that the backlog work items with due dates were auto-created, so they can go and take action against those things. The outcome was, with 3 weeks left-ish, I think the deadline for them is October 31st, 96% of their resources have been updated already, without a project manager or a spreadsheet. Again, as I mentioned on the last slide, when I was talking to the TPM about this project at Outreach, she was like, this is probably the #1 point, is that I didn't have to go and chase people individually. Again, a very simple thing, but was really hard to do before Cortex. Security and compliance. I think we might have some security folks on the phone right now who hopefully saw value in some of the other use cases we talked about, but more specifically to some of the things they might be dealing with. Just ensuring software is up to date with your organization's best practices, using the latest patched packages when available, connected to existing security tools you already have and you're paying for, and vuln management things. Why it's hard, probably no surprise to folks here. Absorbing security best practice into software development is not a new thing. I mean, relatively speaking, I guess, for the last 5 to 10 years, we've slowly started to make this shift in the way that organizations are organized, but it's still not quite perfect yet. And there's some gaps, and there's some moments where folks are moving forward with creating software, and then a security person raises their hand and says, that's not the way it should look, or why isn't it connected to XYZ that we're paying for? What failure feels like, again, sorry for a small amount of FUD, but Vulnerabilities are a reality. Exploited vulnerabilities don't necessarily have to be. If we can clamp down on how long it takes to fix these things. Not promising that an IDP can solve this problem. It's a very difficult problem to solve, but tracking how long it takes people to fix these things when they do become presented to them is really important. Could lead to longer certification times. Sometimes some of these security certs that your company might be looking at, like ISO 27001, which take a very long time. We've been through it a couple of different times at other companies I've been at. Can you not? Sorry. My dog is making a lot of noises. Hopefully you can't really hear that. But it does require attestation of how your software is being developed today and what practices it's following. Wouldn't it be easy to just be able to pull up a security scorecard that says, all of our software that looks like this has to have all these things in place before it can go out the door? Cortex context, and looking at some of the integrations, talking to customers about what they're integrating with. I do see Sneak and SonarQube a lot, as well as other security tools. I think I mentioned we've got about 50 plus across the whole stack, and then a number of those are security tools. Git is still probably the #1 integration I see in security scorecards, which hopefully is encouraging for folks that don't feel like they have a very mature security program yet or aren't using a lot of these other tools. You can still do branch protection, approvals, check for approval, at least one approver, and maximum number of vulnerabilities using just Git. So it's definitely easy to get started with a security scorecard without a lot of other technology. Okay, I want to use a SoFi use case here. I mentioned Log4j should still be fresh in people's minds. I think it was 2021. SoFi needed to immediately understand which services were running an outdated, vulnerable Log4j package, as everybody had to. They turned to Cortex to pinpoint and update all of them. So I've also talked to some security leaders from my past about what their experience with Log4j was like, and a lot of it sounded similar. They were looking at a spreadsheet. How was the stuff built? What version was it using? Who owns it? And that spreadsheet was probably not updated in a while. And so that was kind of the best case scenario for most folks. So what SoFi did is use Cortex CQL, the search engine, to quickly search what's using an outdated version of this thing, who owns it, and then they could create a scorecard and an initiative that says, you've got to update this immediately. And then they were able to view progress really quickly and say, okay, what's still outstanding? Who needs to take action? Why haven't they taken action? So outcome, not surprising, immediate identification of all vulnerable services with 100% update compliance in just weeks. Come here. This is Huck. Sometimes he stops if I hold him, so we're doing this right now. Okay, let's talk about cost optimization. This is probably my favorite one, again, because it's still relatively new for me and I'm still learning a lot about it, but it's pretty exciting. There's probably 3 sides to this use case. Productivity, a little bit more quantitative, like memory utilization, and then time to market. So in the first one, productivity, this is the one you're probably going to hear about the most, but might be more difficult to actually measure. Ensuring adherence to best practice is going to reduce cycle time for devs, reduce that approval time, eliminate some of that rote work and how they actually create these things and ship them. And then you save money on how efficient they're being. But again, a little bit more concrete would be resource memory utilization. Cloud spend can go up if code quality is poor, or things are not designed the way that they should be, or even something as simplistic as requested memory at startup is higher than is actually used at startup. So those kind of things start to incrementally contribute to a higher cloud spend. And then time to market. You can use plugins to connect to more of your COGS management solutions. So you can actually understand the health of this service or resource is fairly low, but it's supporting a product that brings us the most revenue, which is problematic. So it can help engineering leaders decide what should take priority, where do we need to backfill things, where do we need to add more support or more people. So why it's hard to measure and attribute without benchmarks. Kind of cost savings in general is very difficult to understand. So in any way that we can sort to chip away at it with some of the scorecards or initiatives, I think will help a lot. What failure feels like, slow time to market. If you feel like releases are not launching on time, or it's slow to actually fix things when issues are found. Rapidly increasing cloud spend, which I think everybody's feeling right now, because we know that right-sizing compute's really not easy. So the easier we can make it for folks to do that automatically, programmatically, the better. So let me take you through two examples. One with Let's Get Checked Again, which is similar to a migration use case, but I wanted to add it here because of the estimated cost savings in doing so. So the trigger here was that Let's Get Checked was spending about 75% more than they needed to without containerization. It's on the ground. I can't. It's too heavy. That wasn't my calculation. That was kind of what they shared with us. They did the math. They realized they were spending more than they should have been. So they wanted to move everybody to Kubernetes. And so they wanted to use Cortex to help facilitate a really fast migration, create scorecards for containerization, track progress by team, product grouping, individual, and then use templates to bootstrap new services. Very quick, efficient, 3-step process in Cortex, but again, very powerful because it's pulling live data from all across the stack. So the outcome here is that they actually shaved 8 months off of their planned migration. I think they had planned for it to take 20, and it took whatever that is, 12, which is pretty significant. If you had promised that you're going to start recouping more spend at a certain date, and you can move that timeline up, that's pretty significant. The next one, I'm not going to name the company here, but it's a security company, 800-person company that's a customer of ours. And the use case here is reducing that memory spend. So I kind of alluded to this a little bit, but the trigger here was that they hypothesized that services were requesting, or I should say services were being built to request more memory usage at startup than they actually ended up requiring, which is pretty common. You want to be conservative in some of those estimates sometimes, but that can increase cost. And this is an easy place to start to cut those costs. So again, creating a scorecard, auto checks for memory usage, compare requested to actually used. And then you can quickly identify, I think they had 3 different levels in their scorecard. I think the gold level was less than 30% memory waste. The silver was less than 60% memory waste. And anything below that was like, you have to update this immediately. And then they were able to kind of chart progress over time and see that a 30% average improvement in memory allocation after that across 300 plus services. But it also helps them get a bit better going forward to make sure that folks are being a little bit more accurate when they're actually creating new things. So we talked through 5 use cases so far. One that you'll notice was missing was developer productivity. So let me talk a bit about that. Developer productivity is really the bread and butter of IDPs, which is why it's hard to give like one use case example of how one customer was more productive, because it really spans the entire platform. That's kind of why they were built. So you've got catalogs, which kind of reduce time spent searching for context, owners, on-call information, dependencies, that saves a lot of time. Scorecards make it obvious and achievable to improve the quality and state of your software. Obviously, we're helping to reduce downtime there or reduce any kind of potentially security incidents that you might have. But moreover, more tangible is just eliminating that back and forth between devs and ops or TPM saying, does this look like it should before I ship it? Initiatives kind of give that permission to prioritize. I mentioned earlier that we saw a lot of devs saying, it's not just that I don't know what to do first, it's that I don't know if I have the permission to prioritize that thing according to what my leaders say is actually important. So initiatives are kind of that implicit permission that says, above all else, you've got to get this thing done by Wednesday. And then scaffolder, reducing code, of course, if you're going to have templates that are already created to bootstrap new resources, but also kind of like fill in the blank style forms. So it not just kind of reduces time spent in creating a thing, but also reduces overall risk. If you're going to templatize these things, that also kind of reduces risk area. And then the dev homepage, just making action obvious. User experience is so important in these types of portals. Access to information is not the only thing that you need. It's prioritized information, clear information, knowing how to take action and what's next. So you might still be thinking, like, how do you really measure or track improvement to productivity though? There are lots of solutions in market today. I think I mentioned the Eng metrics and Eng intelligence tools that do something similar to this, which could be a good pairing for an IDP. So join us October 31st for more on what developers want from the IDPs that can kind of help inform how to make a healthy, happy, productive developer. But also stay tuned. Next month, we have more to share here. So let's talk about the suggested order of operations. I promised that I wasn't going to leave you with just a bunch of cool stories about how people use IDPs. Hopefully some of that has helped you maybe create a business case if you need to, or if you are a current customer. Hi, nice to see you. Maybe this gives you some ideas of how other customers in our ecosystem right now are using the tool. But if you're kind of new to this process or new to an IDP, here's kind of our suggested order. So what you're looking at here is the Cortex IDP maturity curve. It's something we developed to help our new customers understand what to tackle first. Again, the IDP space is still relatively new. It's very rare that somebody comes to chat with us and says, I already know exactly what I want to do and how I want to do it and the order I want to do it in. More often, they're asking us for our advice in what actually works and how to tackle those things. And so this is the kind of maturity curve that we've seen work the best over our customer accounts. The first step, aggregating, shouldn't be a surprise. As I've said, the number one requirement for an IDP would be having this unified data model, having this system of record. So this first step is just bringing in everything and deciding how you want it to connect to one another. And that's where catalogs come in. The next step is the assessing step. So now that you have everything in one place, taking the time to actually say, what does good look like? Where do we fall today? If you're not using any kind of framework for this right now, that's a really important process just to benchmark where you're at. And then after that, prescribing things, helping folks understand what should they do to get better, and actually enabling them to do that is the fourth step, providing the tools and templates for them to work quickly, and then optimizing. Then you're starting to worry about kind of these, how do I get this even better? How do I reduce clicks to value for my developers? How do I tune the experience so it's more similar to other workflows that they have? All of that kind of comes in the last phase. So if we kind of tie these to the use cases that we talked about, if your very first step, which is also a great place for like a proof of value or a technical workshop, again, whether you're talking about Cortex or talking about another IDP or talking about building internally, you should really start to tackle first, bringing the things in, everything in one place, all the data in one space, so you can actually see it, and then start to form actions off of that, rules off of that. But even in just doing that, you've already kind of ticked off the service ownership use case, incident management, which is kind of connected to service ownership, and then security and compliance as well. Just having that all together is going to enable these three use cases to kind of lift off immediately. The titles at the top there are not the only owners of that thing, but maybe you should think about more like who else might want to be involved with this phase. We do tend to see a lot of SREs in this phase, security as well, maybe because those personas tend to feel the biggest pain without that access to information. The next, actually driving action, once you've collected everything, once you know what good looks like, everything has an owner, everything has documentation, then you can start to pick off these additional use cases. Then you can start to tackle off migrations. So now I can see who is using Elasticache, who has not containerized yet. Once I have all that information, then I can start saying, what are folks using today and how do I get them to the next step? This is also where more production readiness comes into play, continuous compliance to make sure that as rules change or as software evolves, things don't kind of fall out of compliance without you realizing it. It's also where developer self-service comes into play more. Once you've created those standards, have everything, create standards, and then enable people to go and create those things really quickly, to create new software really quickly is kind of at this phase. And then titles at the top, this might be where you, if you haven't already, would be useful to bring in TPM, DevX, DevOps, platform engineers. Take this with a grain of salt. This is what we tend to see, but as I said, a lot of people come to the table first. It might be a DevOps person who's the first person to start this project. So I don't want to say this is prescriptive, just that if you haven't brought these people into the equation already, this is the time to do it. And then the last step here might be useful to bring in your product team. This is when we're really optimizing the experience, do those cost insights, clicks to value, get plugins into your platform as well, so you can start bringing in data from different places and visualizing it for faster time to action. We launched plugins, I think, a month ago in Cortex, and we've already seen folks building some interesting things. One of them was just bringing in more vulnerability data. So we bring in a set amount of vulnerability data from the solutions that we integrate with. And we had a company that wanted to bring even more in so that the developer wouldn't have to leave that one screen, and they had all the context in one place. So that's an example of kind of optimizing the experience you can kind of consider a little bit later in the process. Okay, that's it for now. We went through a ton of information. My counterpart, Cameron, has made the slides available. We'll make the recording available. If you're interested in hearing more about how Cortex can help accelerate some of these initiatives, or if you have ideas for others that you were hoping to hear about in this call, we would love to jam about those. So visit us at cortex.io, but Cameron will also be in touch after this. Cody, do you want to take me through any questions?
Yeah, sure, Lauren. So we've got a couple questions. So we're just going to take them from the top. Our first audience question was, how do internal developer portals streamline development processes, and what efficiencies can be gained by developers and development teams?
Yeah, I'm not sure when this question was asked, but I hope that kind of slide where I went through the full life cycle of how IDPs contribute to developer productivity might help answer a little of this. Streamlining in my mind with IDPs comes down to how robust the data model is that's been set up, what your information architecture looks like, how many different tools across your stack that you've connected. Once you get all those things in place, the sky's kind of the limit of what you can do on top of that to optimize how developers are working. But the brief version of it is getting the catalog in one place is going to improve how folks learn from others of how things were already built. And then on the other side of the equation, tools like Scaffolder and Actions are going to enable you to quickly spin up new resources with best practices without having to waste a lot of time and kind of operational approvals. So I hope that summary kind of answers that one.
Perfect. And so to participant 433 who asked that question, let us know if you have any other follow-up or further questions. So Lauren, our next question asks, does Cortex have templates for scorecards, or do we need to create our own?
It's a good question. We hear that a lot. I think that there's other IDP solutions in market that only have templates. So I think we've spent a lot of time talking about how you can really build anything, build any rubric for any use case, which is good for some folks and then probably very daunting for others. So we do have templates in the product as well. If you just need a baseline or understanding of like, what does a normal security scorecard look like? Because I haven't done this before and I need some help. Or what does a typical onboarding scorecard look like? We also have a very hands-on onboarding process to help you kind of generate some of those ideas based on the tools you have in the stack. So lots of support there, but good question.
All right, looks like we're actually getting some more questions in as well. So wonderful. I'd also like to remind everyone to jump over to the handout section and grab those while we're here. Awesome. Lauren, looking at our next question, I'm not sure I'm clear on the differences between platforms and portals with regard to use cases each address.
That's fair. I still feel this acutely. I think also some of the analyst firms are still forming their opinion here, right? So I talked about Gartner's market guide on IDPs. I think it's actually internal developer platforms, but they've also included us in that. So things are very much still in flux here. I'll give you an answer from what today looks like, and then my answer for tomorrow might be a little bit different. So actually historical would be useful too. So platforms initially were mostly focused on the orchestration element. So outside of the platform itself, being able to orchestrate processes to ship new services very quickly, services and resources quickly. And whereas portals historically were mostly focused on that catalog element. Now, what we've seen over time is like a little bit of a convergence here. So portals have started offering the scorecarding ability. Now they've realized, hey, we've kind of got the whole catalog set up. This is a rich set of information. This is critically important. We can do a lot more with this. Have added on those scorecarding capabilities, have added on the ability to scaffold new services, resources, templatize those things, send that information outside the platform, create initiatives around these things, create ways to improve your existing software environment. And that's kind of where we stand today. In future, I think that we're still going to see a little bit more convergence in the space. We do play friendly with other platforms that are out there. So I'm not sharing my roadmap with you. Like, I'm not making any commitments here, but I do think, just looking at the market from the amount of like research and conversations I've had, I think we'll see some convergence. Hopefully this question won't really exist in, another year or so.
All right, so you mentioned scorecards again, so we have another question on scorecards. Do you have any type of scorecard planned for metrics beyond the DORA framework, or like SPACE or DevX frameworks?
Yes, I think that's a good. So I guess there's two ways to answer this. One is you can kind of create any scorecard you want. So we have folks that have like the very baseline ones. Here's my security scorecard. Here's my onboarding scorecard, and folks who have very complex scorecards that have dozens of different rules in them from across the stack that are hyper specific to their organization and the initiatives that they're trying to solve. So I think the question behind this question is actually less about the scorecard and more about the way that the data model is set up to enable you to go and create different types of reporting structures. So we do have a DORA scorecard metric that we have. We have a DORA scorecard that we use today, but that's going to get even more robust over time. So we're always looking at different ways to kind of combine the data in the data model to make sure that you can feed a scorecard and really have it do anything you want. And DORA in particular is something we're going to talk a bit more about next month. So I can't give too much away there right now.
Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to an answer to that next month. So it looks like our last question today is, what sort of use cases have been most effective in getting cross-org buy-in? So buy-in is always something that people are difficult to get sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good question, especially because there are so many moving pieces. And I mentioned a lot of different types of personas come to the table first, but can't progress much further unless they bring in their security person or unless they bring in the SRE group. Usually these teams are aligned, but sometimes in very large organizations, it's hard to get that alignment. I would say that some of the top use cases for this would be just the ability to set up a catalog is something that's kind of universally understood. That ownership element, that ownership use case, which was the first thing we talked about, the way that it extends into incident management, the way that it could extend into security as well, makes it pretty easy for other groups to automatically understand, okay, I understand the reason why we're doing this and how important it is. The next one might be that migration use case, which is why some folks feel maybe newfound urgency around this right now, because there's significant cost if you can't migrate an EOL software in time, significant cost to the business, significant risk to the business. So those are the kind of things that tend to like bubble up the most to the executive level of why we need this thing right now.
All right, Lauren, well, we have exhausted our time today, but I do want to give you the opportunity to leave our audience with any closing remarks, if you have anything top of mind. Anything? Just as a reminder, like the handouts are over there. Anything that I've kind of referenced on today's call about use cases, case studies, blogs that I referenced are all over there right now. But more than anything, maybe selfishly because I'm in product marketing, I just love to have conversations about the use cases that you feel in your role right now. It's so different at every organization. And so I would never mean to come on here and say, these are the 6 and that's all you need. That's all that exists in the world today. It's the top 6 that we see, but I'm always curious what else is out there. So I would just welcome conversations. If you're not ready for a sales conversation yet, I always love doing research calls. So happy for you to reach out to me as well. I'm lauren.craigie@cortex.io. So I hope some of you take me up on that, but I think that's it. Thank you so much for having us, Cody. Of course. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us back on Techstrong Learning. It's always a pleasure having you on with us.
Thank you.
So I would like to remind our audience today that we have been recording today's session. So following this, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. You can also find it living on the DevOps website. Just visit devops.com/webinars, and it will be in the on-demand section. The two winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing are Sunku R and Charlotte M. So to our two winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your email inbox. I'll be emailing you here shortly. If you don't happen to see an email from me, check your spam folder just in case it happens to be filtered out. I'd like to thank Cortex for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone here, thank you so much for being here for 60 minutes. We appreciate your time and we would love to hear your feedback. So as soon as we close out, there will be a survey that pops up and we would love to hear from you. Either way, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong Learning Experience. Have a great rest of your day and you may now disconnect. Lauren, thank you again.
Thanks everyone. Have a good one.